All right, here's a lesson for notes 1-2, Introduction to Similarity. So in the previous lesson, we learned about dilation and how dilation produces a figure that is similar in shape or identical in shape, but in size it's different. That's essentially what similar figures are. So similar means two things. We saw in our dilation that all of our corresponding angles were congruent. So as we can see in these figures, we know that angle A is congruent to angle X, B is congruent to angle Y, and C is congruent to angle Z, as noted by these little arcs. That's how we show congruent angles. And it also tells us that our corresponding sides are proportional. So yesterday we saw in that activity, we put the ratio of the sides together and we saw that they were all equal. So that's what sides being proportional means, that the ratios of each pair are equal. So that ratio is actually going to be the scale factor. All right, so let's look at these two triangles. So as we can see here, we know that angle A, so let me do this in green. So angle A is congruent to angle X, again, as noted by these arcs. We see that angle B is congruent to angle Y. We see that angle C is congruent to angle Z. And again, we know that by the arcs. To check the ratio of sides, we're going to match up our corresponding sides. So to match up sides, you can just match up your small, your medium, and your large. So 3 and 6 are both the small sides. 4 and 8 are the medium sides. And 5 and 10 are the large sides. All right, so to match up our corresponding sides, it actually doesn't matter which one you start with. So I'm just going to go from left to right. So 3 over 6 equals 4 over 8. And that's going to be equal to 5 over 10. And just to check, 3 over 6 we know is 0.5, 4 over 8 is 0.5, and 5 over 10 is 0.5. So this is showing that the corresponding sides are proportional. So if that's true for two figures, it doesn't have to be triangles, it can actually be other shapes as well. So if that's true for two triangles, we can say that these two triangles are similar. If they are similar, we can write what's called a similarity statement. So we're basically going to name this triangle. So I'm going to call this triangle ABC. This symbol right here, so it's just a little squiggly line like that, that means similar to triangle XYZ. So the order of the letters does matter. You need to make sure you're matching up your corresponding angles. So as we see, ABC matches up with XYZ. All right, so just a little practice matching up corresponding sides. So we're looking for the side that corresponds to KM. So KM is here. The easiest thing to do, I wouldn't go off of the picture, I would go off the letter. So KM is the last and the first letter, so that's going to correspond to FM. So these are the corresponding sides. Same thing with the angle. Look at the order of the letters. Angle F is going to match up with angle K. So angle F and angle K are corresponding. LM, so that's LM, corresponds to EM. And again, the order of the letters does matter. We're matching up the order here. All right, so again, we can use these letters to kind of match up our sides. So let's look at SR is going to match up with KL. And then we have KM. So that was KM is going to match up with SQ. And that's just going to leave our third side here, RQ and LM. All right, here's one that's a little bit trickier. We have two overlapping triangles. We see we have the smaller one here, and then we have the larger one here. Okay, so to match up our corresponding sides for these ones, it's actually a little bit easier because you just have to match up the sides. So this side is going to match up with this side. This side is going to match up with this side. And then we have the bottom. PD is going to match up with PR. So when they're overlapping, sometimes it might be hard to tell the two different triangles, but matching up the sides is fairly easy because they're just going to be on the same side. All right, so now that we know how to match up sides, we can use the fact that two triangles are similar and how to match up our corresponding sides to be able to solve for missing sides. All right, so in this diagram, it says that triangle STU is similar to triangle FED. So we're going to use that similarity statement and the fact that the triangles are similar to solve for the missing side. So we're solving for FE. So I'm going to see FE matches up with ST, which means that UT is going to match up with DE. So similar means that the ratios of the sides are equal. So we're going to use that fact to set up a proportion. So x over 182. Okay, it actually doesn't matter where you start. I usually just like to start with the x. So x over 182, and I put those together because they're corresponding. You just have to make sure you go in the same order. So I went from the smaller to the bigger, so I need to go from the smaller to the bigger for the next fraction. It's going to be 48 over 156. So there's the setup. Now we can cross multiply. So x times 156 is 156x. And then we're going to do 48 times 182. Oops. So 48 times 182 is 8736. Okay, then I'm going to just divide both sides by 156. And we get 56. So our missing side is equal to 56. All right, here's an example where the triangles are overlapping. There should be triangle symbols here. I don't know what happened to them. Okay, so again, just going to match up our sides. A little easier when they're overlapping. So the 9 and the side that's missing is going to match up. And then we have the 8 and this side. And actually, we're given a third side here, which we don't necessarily need, but we can use if we wanted. Doesn't matter because since we know the triangles are similar, we know that this ratio and this ratio are going to be the same. All right, so here's x. So I'm going to say x over 9. So I went from the bigger to the smaller. Then it's your choice if you want to use the 22 and 11 or the 16 and the 8. So I'm just going to do the 22 and 11. And maybe some of you can see the math here. 8 times 2 is 16. 11 times 2 is 22. 9 times 2, this should be 18. So let's just confirm. We're going to cross multiply. 11x equals 22 times 9, 198. And divide both sides by 11. Oops, 198 divided by 11. We get 18, which is what we suspected. So our missing side length is equal to 18. All right, one last example here. So here's a case where they give us a little bit of extra information. This angle measure, we don't actually need that. It doesn't matter because we already know that the triangles are similar. What we're looking at is the relationship between the sides because we want to solve for x. All right, so this solving is going to be a little bit more complicated, but first thing I want to do is match up my sides. So let's see, LN is going to match up with LR. And then we have ML is going to match up with QL. Okay, so now let's set up our ratios. So I like to start with the x, so 3x plus 5 over 4 is equal to, so I went from the top to the bottom, so I need to go from the top to the bottom, 48 over 6. All right, so now we're going to cross multiply. So we need to be careful when we cross multiply because we are going to be distributing. So 6 times 3x plus 5 is equal to 4 times 48. Okay, so let's distribute. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 5 is 30. And then 4 times 48 is 192. So now we have a pretty simple two-step equation. We're going to subtract 30. So I have 18x equals 162 and divide both sides by 18. equals 9. And then if you wanted, we could plug this in just to see. So 3 times 9 plus 5. So 3 times 9 is 27 plus 5 is 32. And to check to make sure that it's right, we can set up our ratio. Well, 48 over 6 should equal 32 over 4. 48 divided by 6 is 8. 32 divided by 4 is 8. So that's a good way that you can check. All right, now for some of the homework problems. So starting with this first example here, overlapping triangles, but we're going to match up our sides. So I have the x we know is going to match up with the 26, the 14, and the 63, and then the 24 and the 108. So some extra information, doesn't matter. Start with x, so x over 26. So I went from the big to the small, so I need to go from the big to the small, so I'm going to use the yellow side. 108 over 24, and then we're going to cross multiply. So 24x equals 108 times 26 is 2808. Divide both sides by 24. Equals 117. X equals 117. All right, here's another example. So we're going to match up our sides. So we do need to use a similarity statement for this one. So SM matches up with ST. And then we have SN. So we have SN is going to match up with SU. It's really important you use those similarity statements. All right, so here's X. So it's going to be X over 14 is equal to 9 over 18. So again, this one looks pretty simple because I can say, well, 9 times 2 is 18. 7 times 2 would be 14. So I think the answer is 7, but let's just make sure. 18x equals 9 times 14, 26. And divide both sides by 18. So I think the answer should be 7. 126 divided by 18 is 7. So another way you could show this if you want, if you see that 9 times 2 is 18, technically you can do that here too. 7 times 2 will give me 14, which would mean x equals 7. Okay, here's another example. So I'm not going to highlight since we know that the corresponding sides just match up in terms of where they are when they're overlapping. So 8x plus 2 over 10. So I went big to small, so I need to go big to small, equals 63 over 7. What you could also do is use this to figure out what the scale factor is and use that information to solve. I just like to set up my proportion. So 7 times 8x plus 2 is equal to 10 times 63. So distribute. 8 times 7 is 56. 7 times 2 is 14. And 10 times 63 is 630. So subtract 14. So 56x equals 630 minus 14 is 616. Divide by 56. We get 11. All right, one last one here. So we're going to use a similarity statement. So RT, that's RT is going to match up with WT. And then ST is going to match up with VT. All right, so I have 4x plus 14 over 9. So I went from left to right, so I need to go from left to right, equals 48 over 8. Cross multiply here, so 8 times 4x plus 14 is equal to 9 times 48. So distribute, that's going to be 32x plus 8 times 14 is 112. And then 9 times 48 is 432. So a little bit of algebra, subtract 112. You get 320 and divide by 32. So you should get x equals 10.